Tempestuous Magic. This is a feature for the Storm Sorcery Sorcerer subclass in Baldur's Gate 3. You get that feature at first level in this class. This feature, when you cast a leveled spell, so first level or higher spell, you get access to a bonus action for the rest of that turn. Using it lets you fly up to 30 feet, and you're immune to opportunity attacks while flying. The game will indicate that you'll still provoke them, but you won't. So the ability suggests itself as an escape mechanic. Rather than making your fragile spellcaster more tanky, you make them more mobile, casting a spell from a risky position only to escape opportunity attacks and hide yourself in some obscure spot. That's not to mention spamming ritual spells out of combat to fly around at will for no spell slot cost, or just tactically retreat from enemies for a few rounds so your concentration buffs don't fall off of your party members. And you can do all of that right from the very start of the game. You could just take one level of Sorcerer and then go back to whatever else you were doing. I've been pretty happy with Druids and Clerics, for example, with Tempestuous Magic. If you do that, though, keep in mind that the couple of spells that you're going to get to pick from that one level in Sorcerer, they will scale with Charisma rather than, say, Wisdom if you take Cleric or Druid levels or whatever your primary spellcasting class is going to scale with. And so you may want to pick spells where that doesn't matter, that don't use your Charisma modifier. I think this is a good place for Shield, for example. You just get 5 armor class. It doesn't involve your charisma. Magic Missile. So this will either just finish off a bunch of low-level enemies or force a spellcaster to do a ton of concentration saving throws all at once. And because they're guaranteed to hit and don't scale with your spellcasting modifier for damage, it doesn't matter what your charisma is. Yeah, rituals. There are a lot of them. I had mentioned before that they allow you to activate Tempestuous Magic whenever you want for no spell slot out of combat. There are a lot of good spells that don't really involve your charisma modifier available for sorcerers from first level. Now, cantrips, though, maybe not so much. Like, one of the strengths of taking a dip into sorcerer is that sorcerers get a lot of cantrips with that one level that you take, but a lot of them are offensive. They scale with your charisma. I would have taken kind of the offensive utility cantrips and then Mage Hand or something. I guess Blade Ward isn't the worst thing to have around, but I feel like Tempestuous Magic and Blade Ward both basically accomplish the same thing. You're in a bad way and you just want to get out of there. Will you really use this that much if you have Tempestuous Magic? So you really can take a 1-level dip into Sorcerer and start flying around with Tempestuous Magic, but the spells that you get when you do that it's kind of a mixed bag. What am I recommending here exactly? That you multiclass into Paladin? That's good. Look, I just thought you'd like a place to start. I hope this was helpful in some way. I would probably have fun playing as an entire party of Tempestuous Magic Sorcerer-related builds. Maybe we'll do that sometime. Now, Tempestuous Magic is a simple ability in some ways. Flying is just fun. And I think it's really good, too. For example, most characters will get to move about twice as far in a turn this way. So it's a bit like taking the dash action, but you get to be flying and it's a bonus action. It's perfectly useful to use this as just additional movement. You basically take the dash action. It also reminds me a bit of the rogue feature Cunning Action, where you can disengage and or dash as a bonus action, doing both of those at once, and you get to fly, which is basically what Tempestuous Magic is. That's good. But one of my favorite things about Tempestuous Magic is its balancing, which is literally like magic. It's kind of automatic. The ability sort of transforms over the course of the story. Its significance in combat transforms. So you do need to cast a leveled spell to trigger Tempestuous Magic, and early on you don't have very many spell slots. You don't have to use a spell slot, the spell just has to be leveled. Spell scrolls or, again, rituals out of combat, those don't spend spell slots, but they do trigger Tempestuous Magic. My point is just that you can't spam spell slots for very long in early game combat, and you won't have a ton of spell scrolls yet either. But in exchange, the movement is extremely powerful early on. Enemies at these levels don't have a lot of mobility, spellcasters don't yet have teleports of their own very often, and range attacks don't yet often do scary amounts of damage. A lot of early enemies that can attack twice are specifically melee. Baldur's Gate 3 is also simply very vertical. They really took advantage of showing you a 3D environment to give you chances to use Dungeons & Dragons combat mechanics with a ton of verticality. There are a lot of early game encounters where you can fly a few floors up, and you're essentially taking over the fight. I mean, are you seeing these environments I've been moving around in the background? These are both early game kind of battle arenas, and they're so vertical. Like, you could just completely escape the entire encounter, or at least heavily restrict enemy movement, depending on the encounter. This one is with some spiders that can teleport to follow you, but they are confined to very tight areas if you do that. Whereas that goblin camp, I mean, they can't get up to you very quickly, so you could just fly up and you're on top of the world. You can do whatever you want to them from up there. In short, you can't necessarily fly all of the time at first, but you don't really need to. And you can see where I'm going with this. Later on, enemies will often be able to teleport or something, but you can now cast way more leveled spells. In particular, I often found myself going back in with Tempestuous Magic. Around level 4 or 5, I'd escape, wreak havoc, and then get back in there to revive an ally or chase a fleeing enemy or light up an area of effect spell. You get it. And you have a ton of spell scrolls to trigger it more often, and your relative durability goes up a lot during these low to mid levels. That's part of it too. Anyway, I just think it's very elegant balancing. I really feel like I can fly increasingly frequently as I get more powerful, and that has me looking at the environment differently as I play. I mentioned earlier that I also like using Tempestuous Magic with ritual spells for out-of-combat movement without spending a spell slot. A lot of the time you don't accomplish anything by flying that you couldn't have done by using Enhanced Leap and maybe Featherfall. But it's fun, and sometimes it is much easier to get to places with weird terrain this way. My main takeaway for you here is that it can be very useful in combat, and so if you have it anyway, it's often just convenient when moving about the map. Use rituals to activate it at your convenience. On that note, I've got a short list for you. These are ways to use leveled spells more frequently without running out for combat Tempestuous Magic or whatever. Some recommendations. You can cast spells from your origin, like Tieflings and a few other options get a bunch of leveled spells per day, just like once a long rest. And a lot of magic items have these too. A lot of the time those will be during a short rest. So you see if I cast just some random, this is from my sword or something, that triggers Tempestuous Magic. I was inspired by Shadowheart's attachment to her artifact and made her a hoarder in one of my playthroughs. My friend ended up kicking Gale out of our camp as a result because, well, it's either a spoiler or you know why. And so Shadowheart swaps in new magical jewelry each fight to use up the daily magic inside of it. Yeah, she gets to fly a lot. What else we got? Well, Warlock packed magic spell slots, which come back on a short rest. That's a thought, but Warlocks also get some Eldritch Invocations that let you cast leveled spells whenever you want. So there's one where you can spam False Life, for example. That triggers Tempestuous Magic for free, potentially even in combat because it's not a ritual. It costs nothing at all times. So far, that's one of my favorite solutions. But finally, you're getting Tempestuous Magic by being a sorcerer. So if you take one more sorcerer level, you can use sorcery points to create more spell slots. That is, if you can keep yourself from spending them all on twinned metamagic spells. But I don't know, Tempestuous Magic is pretty fun. You've certainly got options. Why not do both? Maybe don't convert all your high-level slots into low-level ones, but do whatever you want. Folks, I present to you a gameplay gem, Tempestuous Magic. So, how about that whole party of Storm Sorcerers that can all reposition during combat with Tempestuous Magic? Yeah, what do you think? Was I onto something there? I'm sure you'll let me know. Let's see where we're off to next.